Hi, I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you. I wanted to start by thanking Marie de Gannet and Marie du Castel for inviting me. I brought, I think, too many slides, so I'm going to try to talk really quickly so we don't overrun. My talk today, thank you for the introduction, is about history and how history features in my work as a graphic designer, in my practice as a publisher, and my PhD research. 2 weeks ago, I finished my PhD, and so I will talk a little bit about that. Thank you. Woo. So I'm a graphic designer. I studied in Brussels at St. Lucas, and there is a classmate of mine of high school here today in the audience. Hi, Imke. And so at St. Lucas was a really nice school, but we didn't get taught any history of graphic design, only history of art and history of design. And it was a lovely school. I was very happy there, but I missed that. And when I graduated, I went to the Jan van Eyck in the Netherlands, and we hung out with lots of other designers and theorists and artists, but there as well, history was quite absent. The Jan van Eyck is a postgraduate course if you're interested in Maastricht. At the end of my studies, I didn't quite know what to do, so I was chatting to my friend, that's Stuart Bailey. He's wearing a t-shirt I had designed at school, and he said, oh, maybe you should contact this guy, Daniel Etok. He lives in London for a job. And I did. I emailed him, and he said, oh, we don't need any interns, but if you're in London, let me know. So I booked a Eurostar ticket, and I went to London and knocked on the door. And we had a really lovely conversation, and we had a lot of things in common, and he ended up giving me a job. So I moved to London. I thought, why not for 1 year? I didn't want to come back to Belgium, and worked for Foundation 33. That's all of us. That's Dan wearing my same t-shirt. And we did things like this campaign for Big Brother, which is a huge TV show, as well as very small self-initiated projects. But I didn't really like working for a boss and being told what to do. And all along my studies and working there, I was doing stuff on the side by myself for my friends and colleagues. And so after a year, I started my own studio, thanks to another designer, James Goggin. I met him at an opening, and by chance, we had both designed the same cloud. It's there on above James's desk. And James said, oh, I need to find a studio. Why don't you quit your job and we share the space, and now we can sometimes share jobs together. And that's how I was able to quit my job and become self-employed. That's now 22 years ago. But James had studied in London, and he and I hung out with a lot of his friends, and all of them had this knowledge of history, and the way they were using it in their practice as well, and referencing older designers and being inspired by that. And so I felt like, shit, I don't know this stuff. I really need to study and catch up with them. So I've been using my work as a kind of excuse to sort of study history of graphic design and try to catch up a bit on the stuff I don't know. And in 2008, I made this logo, for example, for Wheels, which is an art center in Brussels. And it's based on the shape of the building. It's an E with 4 lines. But for the signage of the building, we looked at history. For example, the work of Marcel Brotaars. On the left was the inspiration for the signage of the building. And the typeface as well is based on typography in Belgium of road signs, because I really wanted the identity to feel like it's always been there. They recently changed the identity. They still use the logo, but no longer the typeface. But something interesting happened because I worked with them for 10 years. And after a while, you also create your own history as a designer. When you have a client you work with a long time, you start to kind of reference yourself. And so we started to destroy the typeface and try to make it evolve. And there happens this like interesting internal dialogue. And in 2010, I was contacted by a design fair in Kortrijk called Interieur, and they asked me to design an identity. And they said, you can do whatever you want, but you just have to use this logo. And normally when you're a designer, when you get something like that, you put it really small at the bottom of the poster and you make something beautiful. But I thought maybe would be nicer to invert it. And I had also designed this book for them, which was a book of their 40 years of existence, or longer even. And in it were all these posters by Boudewijn de Lare. And he was the guy who designed that logo. And turns out he was still alive. So and I really loved his graphics. They're very flat, very two-dimensional. But I went to interview Boudewijn, and we really got along. And so I asked for his permission to change the logo into a typeface. So we invented all the other letters for the typeface. And then we just used that typeface in combination with the idea of a gradient, because Boudewijn's work is very flat. There's never any depth to it. So I thought it would be nice to kind of think of the pixel as a way to add to his work. These are some examples. But what was really nice was when I finished, another designer, Joris and Terry Kritis, they took on the typeface and they've been designing it ever since. So I like this idea that as graphic designers, you're part of a profession, of a group of people, and not to try to destroy each other, but to build on each other and to kind of help the profession evolve into something better. However, in 2013, I was asked to design the identity for Art Brussels. And it was situated at the location of the Atomium. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to work with the Expo 58 graphics, because it's such a nice connection, and I was really getting geeky on this historic research. And so we digitized the typeface, and I was very happy with myself, until the whole city of Brussels was covered in posters and graphics for the art fair, and we got a letter from the grandson of Lucien de Rook saying, I'm taking you to court because it's copyright infringement. And of course, he was completely right. I didn't ask permission to use this guy's work. And that also learned me something, to do proper accreditation. And I think if I would have asked him before we did a homage, he would have been fine with it. But because I did it without asking, it of course was totally not okay. This is more of a design project. It's a book which I designed, not this one. This one is Street of Crocodiles by Bruno Schulz. And a few years ago, in 2010, I was invited by a publishing company called Visual Editions to make a version of this book, which was written by Jonathan Safranfour. So Jonathan Safranfour took this book and erased, I don't know if I have a photo, no. He erased words and made a new story. And his story is Tree of Codes. So if you see the Street of Crocodiles, he just took out some letters and made a new story. So he's using the history of this book to make his work. And then we were asked to do the design of the book, and quite quickly came up with the idea that the words that Jonathan has cut out of the original book, maybe we could cut them out literally as well. And they really wanted to make a pocket book that's affordable. So it was a long journey to discover how to get this done. So this is the very first sketch we did. But we quickly went to talk to printers to see how it could physically be realized. In this sketch, we realized that would never be possible to hold it in a book because it would tear immediately. And then we made this one where the printer said, oh, if you do that, you have to take out every little hole from the piece of paper. It's insane, it's gonna take forever. And we also cut it out by hand to see how it feels. And then we made these like bridges where it's connecting. And then the printer said, well, if you do that, it's gonna rip because there are all the little corners the paper would not hold. So then we made these strips, and then the printer said, yeah, there are too many bridges, it's too fragile. So we made them bigger, and then there were still too many small holes, so then we made the holes bigger, and we came to something like this. So the holes were big enough and the bridges were thick enough so you could punch the paper out but keep the paper intact. And then they did this quick test. There should be some sound with that, I think. Yeah, anyway, you get the gist. So this was the final result. And I have a little, so every page we had to draw in Illustrator around all the text that was removed. I think the book is 150 pages, took forever. And we also cut out all the pages because in InDesign you don't know what happens if the pages lie on top of each other. And I'm really happy we did, because in the first version there was a hole that went all the way through the book, which was not it didn't feel right. It was like a letterbox. So then we worked with double interlinear, double spacing, and with layers, and emailed also with Jonathan, because the words then start to interfere with each other, and we started to cheat, like move the words around a bit, so you think about which words you read. And this is a little movie of the printing of the book. It's just 3 minutes. Maybe a bit louder? So that's what it looks like. I think this is the last example in the part about my practice as a graphic designer. In 2013, I was asked to design some graphics for the Victoria and Albert Museum of an exhibition called Memory Palace. And Memory Palace was a show where they invited 13 illustrators and designers to work with a story written by Harry Kunzru. And the idea was for the exhibition to be a walk-in book, so that you would walk in the exhibition and read the book, and the book would be illustrated by these illustrators and graphic designers. And Harry's story is set in London in the future, and his idea was that a magnetic storm would have overtaken, and that there would the memory would be illegal, and that the people would try to together reinvent memory. And what you're looking at is the catalog of the exhibition, which was very hard to do because usually you have images of the work, but in this case all the work was still being made. So the catalog became like a pocket book, and in the end, at the back of the catalog was this graphic novel. Oh, sorry. And telling the story of making the exhibition. So there you see at the bottom Harry, the author, telling the story about what I just told you, Memory Palace, to us. Those are the two curators, the person writing the novel and me and the architect of the exhibition. And there are the curators saying which illustrators and designers they're going to invite. And all of us drinking tea and eating cake and listening to them. I don't remember the cake. I don't know if it's true. And there is Harry writing his story and sending emails with the curators about the story. And then the curators walking through the museum. And then there's all of us explaining our ideas, working on our ideas and emailing them. And then the curators talking about the work. There's me talking about the letters in the space and the architect talking about the exhibition's design. And so as the story is set in a landscape that's ruined, where there's been this magnetic storm, we thought maybe it would be nice for the lettering in the show to be rusted. So what you're looking at is all the text in the exhibition in the courtyard in our studio. We had it delivered. It was cut in steel sheets, which we sprayed with vinegar and then rusted. It rusted quite fast. And then we poked out all the letters. There were 18,000 letters. And then glued them onto the walls of the exhibition. So, but I think some people didn't even notice that they were metal letters, but I think most people did. Yeah, they were very, very beautiful. And I still have them in my, at home, all the letters, we're still using them. So, because I think today you can't not think about the ecological impact of your work. And these were the invites, which we screen printed with rust in them, with metal in them, and then sprayed with vinegar. So the invites were all different and rusted as well. Okay, so that's the part about my graphic design. I'm also a publisher. In 2008, I met my husband, Antony Hudek, who's a curator, an art historian, and we fell in love and we really wanted to do something together. And we thought, what can we do? And we came up with this idea of Occasional Papers. It's a publishing company. And we both really felt that there were not enough books in our fields, in my case, graphic design, and in his case, art history, of people who are different, people who don't fit histories that are forgotten because maybe you're not so good at promoting yourself, maybe you're not so good at doing this. We felt like the same 5 famous people keep getting books, and we wanted to make affordable books on the histories of art and graphic design. So since then we've published, I think, about 35 books. But it's not only publishing the books, but also having the events around them. That's really important. Publishing is a way of finding a network, finding a group of people and talking about the books. Sometimes we do a bigger event and then that book that will lead to another. Or yeah, it's a kind of community. I think that's the word I was looking for. And this is how we started. It was in 2009, and a friend of mine, Fraser Muggeridge, he said to me, "Oh, Sarah, there's this great exhibition in London, in South London, but nobody's going to see it. It's terrible. It's by this guy, Ken Briggs." And I said, "Oh, well, sounds great." And then Antony said, "Well, why don't you do something about it?" So in 2 weeks' time, we went to interview Ken, who was a designer, who was one of the first to use the Swiss style in the UK. He worked a lot for the National Theatre, and he was still alive. So Fraser and I went to his studio and interviewed Ken. And in 2 weeks' time, we interviewed him, transcribed the interview, edited the interview, designed the book, and then had it printed. And then did a book launch when the exhibition was closed, just so that we could have an event so that all our friends would go there. And that was how we started as Occasional Papers, with nothing more than a little pamphlet. Oh, it's the wrong. I can't go back. Oh, yeah. The size of those little booklets. It's a tiny stapled thing, and we got £300 from the gallery and £300 from the National Theatre, and we put in £300 ourselves. But since then, we've kind of just been having one book pay for the other. That's the motto. So some books sell really well. Like this one is a more recent book. Got launched in Corona. Natural Enemies of Books, which is a response to bookmaking of the distaff side, on the distaff side, which brought together contributions by women printers, illustrators, and typographers to highlight the industry's inequalities. So it's dealing with history, but really from a feminist point of view. And this is our most recent one, which launched 2 weeks ago. And it's a film by Noor Abed, who is a Palestinian filmmaker and artist. And she made a film called Song for, what's it called? I'm having a blank, sorry. Sorry, I've totally forgotten the name of the film. A Night We Held Between. And she made it in 2023 in Palestine, before everything went to hell. And she's been living in Amsterdam since then, not knowing how to deal with making work anymore. So she instead started writing and wrote about the process of making the film. And the film is really about the land, about being in Palestine. And it's a very beautiful and poetic book. I'm going to do quite well on time. Sorry, I shouldn't have spoken so fast. So the last part of the talk, I'll talk a bit slower. As a PhD student. So I lived in London for 13 years, and then Antony and I, basically what happened is I got pregnant with our second child, and London became no longer financially reasonable. So in 2015 I moved back to Belgium, and Antony got a job here. And I was invited to apply for this PhD in the arts at KASK in Ghent, which is where I live now. And a PhD in the arts is a little different from a normal PhD. It's a PhD through making. So you as a designer are part of the process. But as I told you already, this thing with history kept coming back. And that's where I started at the beginning of the PhD, and that's kind of been guiding me all along. When I applied, it was written that I wanted to investigate the relationship between graphic design and contemporary art, but history really kind of grabbed me. But these are some of the books I started with. They're design history books. And in particular, this one by Richard Hollis, Graphic Design: A Concise History, which was my Bible when I was studying. And it's a kind of, overview of graphic design history. It's like a graphic design history for dummies or something. And I noticed something at the back of the book, which is this, what you're looking at, is the index of the content. And you see all the countries in Europe, apart from one, which is Belgium. So he's got the history of France, the Netherlands, Britain, Switzerland, but Belgium is not even mentioned. And I was quite shocked by that. And so I started looking around and realized that there actually was only one other overview book of the history of Belgian graphic design called In Koeien van Letters. And apart from that, there was really nothing. There were maybe some most beautiful poster collections, like seaside posters, but that's about it. And when you go online and you look for a book on the history of Dutch graphic design or the history of British graphic design, it's insane the amount of books you could find. So I didn't quite understand why that was. And at the same time, around the time I had given a talk in Frankfurt. And they made this poster for me, which kind of really sort of shook me, because it was a talk as if I was torn in two halves, the designer and the publisher. And at that point, occasional papers started doing quite well, and I didn't quite know who I was anymore. Am I a designer? Am I a publisher? Blah, blah. So that process of trying to find myself was really part of the PhD. I started talking to other designers. As a designer, that's what you do. Your research happens maybe mostly in studios, talking to other designers. The first one was Paul Ibu, the one on the left, because he had once sent me an email about something. And I went to see him many times. Sometimes people compare him to Donald Trump, because he's really that kind of character. Unfortunately, he recently passed away, but he was very ambitious and also destroyed a lot at the same time. But he designed more than 100 logos. And I went to see him many times, and then that's how it evolved. I asked, who else do you know that should be in my list? Who else should I go see? And they kept asking and asking and asking, and that way my kind of knowledge grew, but mostly it's just through talking in studios with other designers. And I was very grateful to Herman Lampaert, who is there. He was the one who wrote the Incooien van Letters book. He also gave me lots of tips. People were so happy that finally someone was looking at it, and also afraid because it's a generation that's disappearing. Michel Olive also died recently, unfortunately. And in Belgium, there isn't an archive of graphic design. You have an archive of history, of literature. There's an architecture archive, all kinds. But there isn't one single institution dedicated to collecting and preserving graphic design in Belgium. There isn't even an official list that says where all the archives are. So I just started going wherever. And the place that was quite helpful was the Letterenhuis in Antwerp, which is a kind of social history literature archive, and they have a huge poster collection, and a lot of their stuff is digitized. But at the same time, someone said to me, so you could do research on the flea market, and I said, yes, it's true, you can, because graphic design is so open and there's so much of it, you can kind of go everywhere. And because it's a PhD in the art, my practice was really central to it. So I didn't do like a objective history of graphic design. It was my history of graphic design, the stuff I liked. For example, in my research, there are no logos for hospitals. Even though that fascinates me, it's not something I do in my work, so I didn't really go there. So this is a shelf of Paul Hibou, and he saw himself as a multi-artist, a graphic designer, but also an artist, and he put his sculptures and his logos on the same level. So I was really interested in that same idea of having two sides to your practice and how do you combine them and what are you anymore. So the multidisciplinary was interesting to me. And this text really was a kind of such a guideline, messy history, neat history, messy history versus neat history by Martha Scotford. And in it, Martha writes about when we are doing history of graphic design, we really need to not say the stories of the 10 most famous, successful people, but also the stories of people who were assistants, who were partners, wives, others, collaborators, teachers, critics, and to make the history messy, not make it neat, but just open it up. So I became a kind of totally insane collector of facts about Belgian graphic design history. I ended up with more than 500 different folders, and I could have gone on and on and on just gathering information because it's endless. Where do you start? And luckily, there came the invitation from the Design Museum in Ghent to make an exhibition. And that forced me to stop collecting and sort of put some of this stuff out into the world and to explain it to others and share it. But instead of doing a kind of chronological overview, I organized the exhibition by words which came from my practice. So things that are important in my work, like typography, color, education, seriality, social relevance, collaboration. So the exhibition was in the basement, which felt quite relevant too. Often when you go to a museum, the graphic design is like in the vitrine at the beginning. There are some catalogs and flyers. So the graphic design is always the footnote. And that's a 3D logo by Paul Hibou, and at the top is a frieze by Michel Waxman. I worked together with Michael Marriott on the furniture of the exhibition. We decided to paint it bright blue so that the works would really stand out. Sometimes some of the works were really hard to find. These are the interviews. I did 5 interviews with some of the designers I showed you before, just so that their voices would stay alive. We also included anonymous work, because you could do design history in so many different ways. You could do it based on the designer or on the type of work, or posters, or on who it's for. But I think it's important also to include work that's done by groups or by people we don't know. And the display was often quite playful and mimicking the idea of a street. There's some work by Boudewijn de Lare that I talked about earlier. This is the seriality section. I was telling you about wheels, what happens when you work for yourself, for the same client for a long time. So what happens with series. And now we're looking at surface. The graphic design is not just a flat thing, it's got depth. A book has a tactility, and that's the education area where there's a carpet I designed, and this was the lectern where we did the talks at night. I think that's the end, yep. Apart from the videos, interviews in the exhibition, there was also a large projection of some of the books in the vitrines, because I felt it was important to have, for you to be able to look through the material. So this is, for example, a book by Polyboo. We worked with different hand models, some young people, some old, some of the designers modeled the work, just to get a feeling of different types of people accessing the work. So I think making this stuff public has really been crucial to the PhD as well. At the same time, we organized events in the show, the Decolonizing Design workshop, a lecture series, my classes, there were guided tours, maybe, to really try to activate the space and for it not to be a kind of dead museum exhibition. And we did this one-day radio program. The Design Museum has a vitrine, and in it we could use it for one day, and I worked together with Phantom Radio. And we invited, I think, 40 designers to come to the vitrine. We had a radio station set up, and everybody brought one object and talked about it for 10 minutes on the radio. And it's on Spotify if you want to listen. And then we left the work behind in the vitrine for a month as a kind of addition, because we had to think about how this history of graphic design is relevant today. How does it connect to the designers who are here? Belgium has such an active and successful design scene today, but it's interesting to reflect how it connects. And then after the exhibition ended, with occasional papers, we published this book, which I edited and designed and wrote some text for. And the typefaces are Belgian typefaces. The one on the cover is called Jumbo Mambo. It's based on a design by Jean Colette and Jos Dufour called Indépendant. And it was designed for the centenary of Belgium in 1930 for a building. And then the typeface inside is called Or Lemon, which is based on George Lemon's Antiqua. So that's one of the few Belgian typefaces I could find. And the book is divided in different chapters, again referencing this way that how graphic design history can be done in different ways. So one is context. Those are articles on different subjects. And there were many people who contributed to the chapter. So a lot of the speakers that I invited to the exhibition then ended up writing texts for the book. Between the exhibition happened and the book happened, there was a killing of George Floyd, and I realized that I could not publish a book about the history of graphic design without addressing the colonization of Congo in the book. And I could not find anybody to write it for me. And I didn't know where to start, but I thought I gotta do something. So there is a text on this subject in the book, but it's a very first scratching, the beginning of what should become someone else's PhD, I hope. But I looked at, for example, the archives of the National Lottery, which started as a colonial lottery, the archives of Côte d'Or packaging, which used extremely racist packaging to promote their second-rate chocolate during the Second World War, or international fairs using problematic depictions of black bodies. But even in the Africa Museum in Tervuren, you see things like this, which is a prison in Kalemi, using the Indépendant typeface that I showed you, which was at the time a trendy, beautiful typeface on a prison. So there were designers involved in thinking about beautiful typography applied to prisons. And it's still there, this prison, it's still in use today. But also, this is a newspaper by Lumumba, who became the first prime minister of the independent Congo. And of course you can read it. The title of his newspaper is Quotidien Organe de Combat du Mouvement National Congolais. It's a daily combat organ. So they also were using graphic design to combat against oppression. And another text I wrote was on the Belgian Chamber of Graphic Designers. One of the reasons why there is no history of graphic design is because we don't have a union. There's no trade organization defending the interests of graphic designers in Belgium. But there used to be one, Chambre Belge des Graphistes. They existed from 48 to 78, and they even had a house for a while in Brussels with a bar in the top called the Recto Verso bar. How cool can you have a title? I mean, and people like Lucien de Roux, Fernand Baudin, and others were members, and they would look at it, share each other's work and take it abroad. Here you see them in the Festival de Lure in France. But also the president, Charles Rohoni, he really took it one step further, and he said Belgium is without a doubt the European country with the most foreigners per square kilometer. This European situation made it a country without graphic borders. There is no such thing as a typical Belgian style, which I really like. I think I felt able to do this research because Belgium is such a complicated country. I think if you were doing nationalist research on French graphic design right now or British graphic design, it would be problematic. But because Belgium is so, maybe it would be a problem if I did Flemish graphic design history, but Belgian graphic design history I think is really cool. The Chamber also did actions to raise funds for good causes. They were open outside of office time so that anybody could go see. They had the exhibition space, and they had ateliers for children. But the coolest thing I found is this, which is a pricing agreement. And Michel Olive gave me a stack of them like this many. And so they all said, we're all gonna charge the same amount of money. We're not gonna undercut each other. Because if graphic designers, if we start quoting against each other, and we pull our prices down, whereas if we all say, okay, a layout is gonna cost 4,000 Belgian francs, we can't be taken down in price. So yeah. The middle chapters are the video interviews from the exhibition that are transcribed. And then there's a plates section, which are images of the people that I was not able to include in the book, but that I wish someone else would write about. And they have it's a kind of visual essay. You can sort of see the links between the works in the layout. And I think it's also how you feel that it's maybe the designer doing the research, or the design, how graphic design can contribute to the research, the kind of visual links between the works. This is, for example, Albert and Geert Setola. There's a father and his son, and I love the way they are like looking at each other. They both works with eyes, or the use of trees in different people's works. And the last section of the book is designers, and those are monographical texts. It's the most straightforward ones. And I wrote two of those, one on multi-art, which was a publisher by Lilian Emma Stahl and Polly Boo. And at the beginning, when I met Polly Boo, was like, it's my thing, I did it. And then I went to the archives, and I think I went to visit him 10 times and realized that it was actually his partner, Lilian Emma Stahl, who ran it. And Multi-Art was a kind of paper edition company, so they would contact artists to make a small paper sculpture that you could buy at an affordable price, because they wanted people to have art in their homes. So these are some of the things that they made, all die cut, made out of paper. I also wrote a text on Janine Behagel. She's one of the few female designers I could find. I really, really looked hard for her work. The problem was she stopped working as a designer. So she studied in Germany, then she studied in London. No, first in Bruges, then in Germany, then in London. Then she returned to Bruges to set up her own studio and ran it for, I think, 15 years and had quite successfully. But then her son died, and she got really sick of graphic design, and so she stopped making graphic design. And so her work is nowhere to be found, just maybe a poster in a collection, and then the flea market brought me, the tweedehands.be got me some more of her work. But then, yeah, the problem of underrepresentation of female graphic designers really has been an issue in my research, and I try to find all kinds of ways to access them, including, for example, this one, which is Frida Bursens. It's a poster she made for the Design Museum in Ghent. She worked for them for quite a while. I went to their archives, and there was the name of her partner and of her brother, but she herself was not even in the archive of the own institutions she worked for. So I ended up contacting schools to ask names of graduating designers and try to find people this way. Because if you ask someone, they'll always remember the most famous. So there's another way to try and get to people. And this system of thinking got me involved with the Flemish Architecture Institute, who did a Wiki Women Design project. So and in which my students and I took part. So a few years ago, we all ended up writing Wikipedia entries on female Belgian designers. And in the end, I think there were more entries on female Belgian designers than on male designers on Wikipedia, which is also not okay. But yeah. And what was funny, someone ended up writing one about me. It's not very long, but unfortunately, I'm no longer just a designer or a publisher, but now all these other words have come in, which I've learned to accept, that it's actually maybe graphic design, which is expansive enough and can contain all these different things. And this is the most important thing. In the back of the book is a bibliography, which contains all the books I was able to find, all the magazines, any kind of snippet about information, and a list of archives that we put together in the hope that other people will start adding to this history. And this is my last slide. It's a photo of the grandson of Lucien de Rook, who wrote a text about his father for the book, and so we are now friends again. Thank you. That's it.